Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we got a lot to talk about today, including a huge interview from Randy Jordan on the WoW Season of Discovery team, big news over on the forums from players, as well as taking a closer look at the raid logs from BFD this week, because we got some changes and some things we need to talk about. My name is Sky from the Comeback Kids. This is your Season of Discovery news. Sit down, grab a cup of coffee. We got a lot to talk about. Moving right into this interview, they kicked it off with the news on the Ashenvale PvP event, with the player stating how we feel like we're missing some sort of PvE quests within the area, like turning in resources for the faction supply warfare, or even like PvP turn-ins like ears or heads from enemy players. The developer stated that we have a lot more plans with the Stranglethorn event coming in Phase 2, so if you didn't know, that is where the event's going to be held. And they said, and I quote, "The Stranglethorn PvP event will not mirror the Ashenvale event at all. It's going to be very different, very different." This is going to be super interesting to see in the future because, as we know, the next raid is going to be at Nomergan, but the PvP event is going to be in Stranglethorn. Like, maybe it could be some sort of minecart pushing PvP mode, almost like a mobile King of the Hill, where players have to stand on top of a resource cart and push it down to a destination against the opposing faction. You know, obviously this is me just guessing out here and throwing it out in the wind, but for you open world PvP lovers, they also emphasize that they're working on fixes toward gameplay when too many people are on a layer battling each other at the same time. If you've been experiencing Battle for Ashenvale right now, getting your honor up and your rep, it can get really, really laggy and messy if too many people are on one layer, so that's good news to hear as well. Another community member discussed how the new runes available have really great flavor and RPG aspects on them, but specifically the Rogue tanking rune is quite difficult to collect because it requires you to be honored with your supply faction. They were asked if some of these runes are going to be easier to obtain in the future, rather than being really difficult and key to a spec overall, for example, like Rogue and Warlock tanking. The devs responded to the question by saying that they want there to be some sort of friction when it comes to gaining player power, because it is still in the essence of classic World of Warcraft. It's already easy enough that you got to go on a wowhead data mining page, walk into the world, and get all your runes pretty much handed out to you, so they want there to be some key runes out there that aren't too easy to obtain. They want there to be friction. They emphasize that word. They also stated that there are other phases coming inside a Season of Discovery, and they don't want to emphasize every single class in every phase. This very first phase was expected to have friction, and they're hoping things will be a lot more smooth with the player base moving forward. I personally have to agree with the developers on this one because I think one of the greatest things about Classic WoW is that you earn everything you grind for. I personally love doing long quest lines specific to my class, like the Call of Water quest for Shaman or the Varigan's Fist quest line for Paladin. I think it's important with Season of Discovery to remember that this version of WoW is all about taking your time and not rushing things because the max level is only level 25 in this first phase. Another big discussion during this interview was also on the Hunter class. So if you play the Hunter, listen up. They were also asked on what changes they were looking to implement to make Hunter feel more flavorful. The Beast Mastery spec for them right now is putting out all of your runes into your pet's damage, and it feels very similar to regular classic World of Warcraft. The devs replied saying, "One of the coolest things about Hunter and regular classic WoW was the fact that you can melee weave in abilities." They confirmed that right now, Melee Hunter may not be heavily supported, but this is just the beginning and there could be more coming. They also emphasized that Beast Mastery got incredible buffs to make their pet be able to tank inside of dungeons, and even Marksmanship Hunter to be Lone Wolf and stand more still and snipe from far range. Pretty much what they're trying to say here is that they want players to try and not play Hunter so traditionally and mix it up with some melee weaving and maybe Lone Wolf sniping on a Hunter. They were also asked about the possibility of bringing other race/class combinations such as Dwarf Mage into Season of Discovery. They responded that there is a lot of technical issues that come into play when you're adding something like that, and it's something that would take a significant amount of time. The more important thing to take into consideration, though, would be is that if it's narratively beneficial to Classic WoW. Their main goal is to try to make it feel like Classic as much as possible, and just adding a little bit of more exploration as well as class diversification rather than completely changing the game as a whole. They simply feel that it's too conflictive toward the community to be investing so much of their time into something like that. So if you're looking for that Torrent Paladin or maybe that Dwarf Shaman, I don't think it's going to be coming anytime soon. Now, when it comes to leveling in Season of Discovery, the developers even mentioned the possibility of there being some sort of experience boost increase as you get into the later phases of the game. Now, of course, none of this is confirmed because they still wanted to make it feel like a journey when you're leveling in Classic, so they're going to be taking surveys on if people are interested in this sort of gameplay style or consideration. They did emphasize, however, that no matter what, though, to get to level 60, it is going to take a significant amount of time. They don't want to completely strip away the fact that they want the player base to feel like they're on a journey, and they always want to try to make it feel like Classic WoW. Another very big question was, how are they going to cater to the new specs in the end game when it comes to raid tier sets and specialization viability? They had a very simple and straightforward response in this, being that they can't confirm that every spec is going to be viable in every situation. A lot of these specs, like Warlock tanking, for example, are going to be very situational. There are going to be specific times where you need every spec's viability, but don't expect it to be a one-and-done deal. So if you're playing a Enhancement Shaman, don't expect to be performing outstanding out of every other fight. Or maybe a Warlock tank, there's going to be times where you gotta set that down and do something else because it's not so viable. They also mentioned something else that was pretty surprising to me. It was that they flat out said, overall, they have no plans at the moment to take Season of Discovery beyond level 60. The only way they will even begin to consider something like this is that if the success highly continues, and if their team is willing and able to move forward, staying with the roster they have now. Obviously, it's going to have to come down to player feedback and our enjoyment overall, so that just pretty much wraps up that interview with all the topics that were actually worth mentioning. Now, going over some of the logs inside of the raids as of right now, we do have a little bit of a clear-cut pattern when it comes to DPS. Now, I know that the max level is only level 25, and the raid is only Black Fathom Deeps, but from what you can see on screen here, this is the parses logged in the 80th percentile, which means that these are the above-average players, ranging all the way up to the best in the game. Overall now, throughout the entirety of the raid, you can see that the physical, ranged, and melee DPS classes are on top, and then the bottom half of the DPS is casters. Now, is this the biggest problem in the world? No, not really. Not when the bosses are definitely clearable and the content has been cleared and it's not on hard stuck or something. But it starts to get into a real gray area when you end up on the boss named Twilight Lord Kelris. For some reason, this boss has an incredibly high amount of magic resist, and casters deal almost little to no damage to this boss, and they're really struggling. What you're seeing on screen right now is the DPS logs specifically just for this fight, and it looks a lot different from the chart we were showing you earlier. The difference here between physical damage dealers and magic damage dealers are sometimes as bad as 3 to 4 times in difference. For example, class specs like the Shadow Priest, Balanced Druid, Frost Mage, and Arcane Mage absolutely have no chance of competing against classes like the Feral Druid, Hunter, Rogue, and Warrior. Not because it's a skill issue, just simply because the boss is so resistant against most magic effects. This can lead to the problem of people excluding class specs like these simply because they will not deal enough damage to the boss. And if you didn't know, this boss at 20% health turns into a DPS race against your raid. So if you do not kill him in enough time, he'll eventually just kill all of you. And of course, if you're not invited into a raid group, you simply won't get any gear. Now, the Classic team has been generally really on point when it comes to fixing and adjusting some things like this. I'm personally hoping they tune down the magic resist for this boss to bring up the caster DPS, and then maybe even increase the armor to help lower the damage applied to the target from physical classes. That way, the fight can still stay difficult and be a DPS check, but you will be now allowed to diversify the class specs if you need to moving forward. Now, ladies and gentlemen, wowhead actually posted a couple helpful articles, one of them being the best in slot phase 1 gear for all classes and specs. So if you're a little bit lost on what class should be getting what outside and inside of BFD, definitely take a minute to check this article out on wowhead. Not only that, if you're struggling inside of BFD and haven't fully cleared it with your raid yet, they also posted an additional article showing you some very helpful add-ons for you to download to give you a little bit of assistance. Add-ons like deadly boss mods to display information during the boss encounter, as well as giving you some timers for upcoming mechanics, information, and debuffs. Now finally, we have a few community discussion notes from our previous video, the first one being from Derza294 saying, I bet Shadow Priest and Ellie Shamans get more love starting next phase. Both of those specs were never viable until level 40 to 60 in Classic WoW, which I honestly do have to agree with. The same thing with Balanced Druids as well, when they get their Moon Conform, because some of the specs in WoW are simply stronger than others in the early game. I mean, look at Hunter DPS compared to everyone else right now. It's just flat out better most of the time. On top of it, casters are usually scalers and need a lot of their spells and their toolkit to even become viable. So excellent comment from Derza here. We got a comment now from Drummer Guy 438 saying that the need for people to take their time is more important than ever. Unfortunately, the nature of streaming and FOMO makes people compelled to participate to race to finish everything as soon as possible. It's a sad side effect to modern gaming expectations. There's plenty to do in Season of Discovery. Those who are tired, I feel like they're out of content and really rushing through it all. Personally, this was my favorite comment under this video because, ladies and gentlemen, you got to remember, we only have 25 levels in this very first phase of Season of Discovery. Going into that raid without completing a bunch of your other tasks, it's really just selling yourself short of an experience that is really nothing but a lot of fun. Please don't strip yourself of a great RPG experience to try and keep up with people that you don't even really care to keep up with. I know nowadays gaming is super competitive, just try to take it easy. Next up, we have Terry Pankhurst saying that, great take on the speedrunners, always the first to complain they have nothing to do, and it's my exact thoughts when I see peeps rushing about around me. I thought that was pretty funny. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, leave a comment below for me to respond to live here on these news videos to have a little bit of a discussion point and talk about it. I would love to see your opinions on some of the topics in these videos. So, if you want your voice to be heard, let me know all about it in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like and subscribe to get absolutely flooded with Season of Discovery content. I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. It's an absolute pleasure to be making content for you all. Until the very end, my name's Sky from the Comeback Kids. I will see you all in the next one. Peace.